James,
Raf.
is down round brat?
I'm not 100% on what brat means.
What do you mean? It's
Well, I mean-
brat, man. Are we brat? It's a simple question. Are we brat?
I think we're brat, yeah. I think we're brat. But again, I'm not 100% sure what it means in the Charlie XCX mold. I haven't listened to the album. It's on my list of things to listen to, so I'm up with the culture. You have a Charlie XCX connection, don't you?
I suppose I do. I'm so Julia. I'm friends with her once flatmate. So very close connection with Charlie XCX, actually.
That's close. You're several handshakes closer. Well, one handshake closer than I am, because I could shake your hand.
I suppose so.
You could shake his hand, and then you're on to Charlie XCX.
So I guess that makes me pretty brat.
Yeah. What's going on? What's happening
With me?
in the world? What are we doing the episode about?
No, okay, we're doing the episode about open source AI, which sounds so boring. Stop it before you're like, oh, Jesus Christ, and you move to another podcast or whatever. You wouldn't, firstly. Secondly, why, when OpenAI is worth all this money and all the hype is around all these companies that are doing their own AI models and LLMs and whatnot, why would Meta, aka Facebook, aka Zuckerberg's company, invest as much money, if not more money, and say, we are giving this away for free? You know, ChatGPT, we're giving it to you for free. The cost will be on us. Why?
Yeah.
That's what the episode's about.
And it's a pertinent question because, well, two things. Number one, Meta released the latest version of Llama, which is its open source LLM
Yeah.
AI.
One thing I didn't actually know until like in the last kind of week, Llama is open source. Open source meaning, you know, anyone can use it. Some people complain it's not open enough, but it's like anyone can use it for free. You can just download the code. You can run Llama.
Don't go and download the weights.
Yeah, but I didn't know that part of their until now, part of the license, the open source license was, and you can make new models, anything you want based on Llama, but it has to start with the word Llama.
Oh, does it?
Well, not anymore, but that was one of the restrictions they lifted. But until now, if you were like making a new model or whatever based on Llama, it had to be called like the Llama Goat or whatever.
Llama Goat. It's the best you can come up with.
I guess Llama-ma-mazing. If I had to have two cracks at it.
I'm going to let that one slide.
How about you? Come on. Don't leave me hanging here. What's your llama thing then, mate? You're such a genius. Come on, branding god.
I'm not a genius or a branding god. But, you know, you don't have to be a chef to critique the food at a restaurant, you know? But yeah, so they released Llama 3.1, which is their latest version. They claim, and they had the benchmarks to prove it, that this is a frontier model.
Exactly.
And when they say when you hear the words frontier model, what that means is basically an LLM which is as performant as any.
Yeah, we're talking, you know, ChatGPT 4.
It's GPT-4 level. It's
Claude, Sonnet / Opus, like 3.5 or whatever.
It's the best of the best.
Gemini, the latest Google. They're pretty much the best ones, right? Like those three, really.
Yeah. And this was like a relatively important milestone because until now the open source LLMs have not been as good as the closed models from companies like OpenAI and Anthropic and whatever. So the idea was that if you wanted to use an open source model that was available for you to tinker around with and tweak and do whatever you wanted with it, by all means do that, but it actually wasn't going to be as good as something from OpenAI or Anthropic or Google or whatever you want to talk about.
And why you do that, probably worth mentioning, is like, even though something like Llama, the previous Llama, wasn't as good as your OpenAI or whatever, I think I said this on a previous episode. Like, my understanding is that, I mean, you've mentioned it before. It's like the people making the most money in the AI space right now are consultants who are just saying, like, yes, pay us for us to implement AI in your business and like promise the world, and realistically end up saying like, we'll help with customer service. But my understanding is a lot of companies basically are like, oh yeah, sweet, we got to do this AI stuff. We got to do generative AI. We got to do this large language model stuff so that we can automate processes. They start by using the OpenAI APIs, And then once they work out how to use it, they're like, hold on, it's cheaper if we just use Llama, as in to people who aren't coders. Coders, just shut your ears for a minute. They basically download Llama, upload it to their own servers on Amazon or whatever it is, and it just runs. They only have to pay Amazon for like the compute cost. They're not paying like a service. They're not paying a service fee to OpenAI.
No, they're not paying OpenAI for credits or to pay OpenAI for their processing.
No, it's just running on their own cloud compute stuff.
That's right.
So it's much cheaper.
Yeah, it is cheaper.
But it was worse, and now it's like, well maybe it's somewhere up there.
It's up there. Yeah, I mean, it's questionable as to exactly. People are still kind of figuring it out. Maybe it's not just as good as GPT-4o or whatever, but it's in the ballpark, and that's a reasonably substantial milestone. Anyway, so they released that. They made a big song and dance about it. As we've talked about in many episodes, Meta have, they called themselves Meta, called themselves a metaverse company. It's not happening. They're still doing VR stuff and releasing new headsets and what have you. But they have also made the pivot into LLMs and AI. Like
there's an alternative universe where, so obviously they went from Facebook to Meta. There's an alternative universe where they went from Facebook to Llama.
I don't think so.
There's got to be one.
What about Llama-ma or whatever the fucking noise you made before?
Llama-ma-mazing.
Llama-ma-mazing.
Well,
that would be huge if Mark Zuckerberg renamed Facebook to Llama-ma-mazing. That would have been incredible. Anyway,
agreed.
So that came out, as we said, but it came out with a mini essay from Mark Zuckerberg and a bunch of podcast appearances from Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah, who's been out there?
We talked about this last week, I think, in our paid episode. Or maybe it was the free one, I can't remember. But we talked about Mark Zuckerberg's soulful white boy upgrade, where, he saw that widely circulated AI image of himself with gold chains, a bit of scruff, putting out Jack Harlow, white boy rapper, neo soul kind of vibes. And he was like, that looks sick, and made it his actual aesthetic.
Yeah.
Possibly the biggest impact that AI art has had to date.
The equivalent is, imagine if the Pope started rocking that Balenciaga jacket.
I think they could be on the cards. Imagine if he came out, was it like St. Peter's Square or whatever in Vatican City, dripped out in the Balenciaga jacket. People would go nuts.
Yeah. Like they are for Zuckerberg.
Catholicism would be back. Anyway, but he did basically a mini essay that he was posted on the Meta website and distributed around. Basically, I'm making the argument as to why open source AI was the future.
This is why I find it really interesting. As I said, at the top, why? How can they afford it? What do they have to gain for it? Instantly, I'm sure every intelligent person listening to this podcast would be like, well, why now would you pay for OpenAI if you can just get Llama, which is nearly as good, for basically free, for negligible amounts of money?
Yep.
If you can just run your own Llama. And that is a great question. And that is kind of half of the point. But yeah, I wanted to kind of speculate, as well as just use exactly what Zuckerberg said, to go through what is the business case for spending as much, if not more money than the OpenAIs, Google Gemini, Anthropic, Claudes of the world to make something as good as theirs and then put it out for free.
Yeah, because there's, I think the estimate was, someone did like an estimate of how much it would have taken to train Llama 3.1. And I think the figure that came in and was at least like $200-300 million to just to train Llama 3.1.
And they're saying like we've already got 4 planned, we've got 5, we've got 6 planned. It's all in the can, and part of that I think is part of the strategy. All right, so I'm going to go through again vaguely based on what Zuckerberg was saying. So firstly, he specifically says it's personal. Obviously, take every single. Yes, it's Mark Zuckerberg wrote an article, but how many eyes have been over this? I don't think it was just like
he didn't just bang it out and hit post on WordPress.
He didn't fire it off at 2:30 in the morning. But he said literally like part of this is personal, and he used the term soul crushing. He said it was soul crushing to work really, really hard on a product and features, only to have a third party, in this case Apple, he's referring to, say you can't release that. You can't do that, mate. And like, he's obviously using a very specific example that has probably been almost like workshopped or whatever. But it makes sense, right? It's like internally at Facebook, we wanted to release an internal marketplace or, their friggin' DM cryptocurrency or God knows what, like various things. and Apple say, and it is true that like for your app on the App Store on iPhones, if you want to release that, it has to meet certain criteria. And the way obviously Zuckerberg frames it is like, this was an app that we built and a feature in our app that we built. We don't want to be in that situation ever again.
Yeah. There's a lot of the Zuckerberg psychology, and you can identify it in a few people. And in the past we've done episodes and parts of episodes about this whole thing about Apple very, very dominant in the smartphone or mobile generation. They didn't necessarily sell the most devices in terms of like raw install base of Android, but they own all the revenue. iPhone users are the ones who actually pay for apps. As a result, companies are kind of locked into doing or not doing what Apple mandates. And there are a few people who are just like on a holy war about that. You know, there's people like Tim Sweeney from Epic who's obviously going the legal route, and there's a few other companies as well that have trying to, like big powerful companies that are trying to get out from underneath Apple's thumb. But no one I think has been more like maniacally committed to it than Meta and Zuckerberg.
Yeah.
And I think that the ceiling deal was in fact the subject of our very first Downrate episode, which was, you know, the app tracking transparency, which was, as a reminder for those that don't remember, when Apple made it so that you had to affirmatively approve as a user to let apps track you for marketing. Many saw it as a direct attack on Facebook. And even though Facebook has sort of managed to get around it, it wasn't as big a problem from the long term. I think it was a big wake-up call.
Yeah, and a direct hit on revenue in the short term. Like there's, you know, a few $1 billion that they lost and won't
Yeah, it was like a $10 billion hole that was blown in revenue. So Zuckerberg is trying to not be in this position ever again on a bunch of different fronts. One of them is open source AI stuff that he's talking about, but also, you know, trying to get their own platform in the form of MetaQuest and the VR stuff, so that they're not at the whim of Apple's huge hardware-based power, basically.
Yeah. And shout outs to Google, because Google, whilst Meta saw it but saw it too late, a lot of, I guess, what Zuckerberg's doing with AI, I think, is reminiscent of what Google did with Android, which was Google also recognizing that, okay, we're not a hardware manufacturer, but we cannot allow ourselves to be, you know, have to be like a gateway through Apple. And then we're able to monetize this through the Play Store. In a similar vein, potentially there is this thing for Meta where it's like, if Llama becomes the AI platform of choice, that maybe down the line is some kind of marketplace opportunity. I'm sure that's not the driving factor, but regardless, it's like that door is open. If they are the controlling platform. But yes, I think like there's that primary thing of just like, we can't put ourselves in a situation where like we have to kind of exist via some other entity who controls people's access to our content and blah, 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 blah. They don't want to be there again. Obvious one, as Zuckerberg said, it was soul crushing. I think number two, and this is like a typical case for open source, is this idea of like crowdsourcing your innovation. They use these same AI models for recommendation engine on all of their platforms, like, you know, Facebook, whatever, Instagram. What content are you going to see next? What ads are you going to see next? So if it's open source, there's going to be all this innovation and development and people working on it. They get to like take the good ideas, implement it into their own stack, and that'll make them more money. Pretty like, simple, like open source kind of idea.
Like he specifically calls out the fact that, you know, the world runs on Linux these days. But it's very clear that he's like, what if the world built on Linux, except we owns Linux?
Yeah.
Like, yes, it's open source. So it's like, it's not just us that own it, but also it kind of is. Like,
everyone's trained on the same, on like our stack, on our code base.
Exactly. The
ecosystem.
They would love for the future stack of AI is built on this nice meta foundation that we understand and we control to a certain extent.
Yeah. And that helps us. It helps us with hiring. It helps us with innovation. It helps everything if it's just like we're doing the thing that is fully integrated with all of our business.
So like, you know, the perfect end state for Meta is they're like, everybody that's building on AI, you know, we've triumphed over OpenAI and Anthropic because our bet that open source AI is what wins in the long term. And it's all built on this Llama foundation, and everyone's interacting with this content via essentially the MetaQuest or our VR environment, which we think about as being like the windows of virtual reality. And meanwhile, Apple are relegated to just rich people who want a Vision Pro.
Yeah.
That's their dream environment.
Yeah. And like if all this innovation isn't happening on like their own platforms and it's just some kind of closed, bespoke kind of Facebook AI algorithms or whatever they're keeping to themselves, all the innovation is happening elsewhere, potentially at OpenAI or somewhere else. And eventually, whatever their internal algorithms they're using there's gonna be certain areas where OpenAI is gonna be better. Gemini, Google is going to be better, and then they're once again relying on third parties for like their own internal business. So it's like it makes a lot of sense from that perspective. And as we've said before, like more broadly, I guess like it's in Facebook's interest for like everyone should just be pumping out AI stuff all the time because like that is content, which then is at the end of the day what they put ads next to on their platforms. We've been over that.
I mean, but it's worth teasing out a little bit more. It's that things that may be problems for OpenAI in the sense where it's like we're responsible for like the slop that people are pumping out. How do we work with businesses to achieve like actual outcomes? Why would someone want to use DALL-E or like the creative uses that we pitch ChatGPT or GPT-4 for? Whereas like Meta's like, well, no, make as much slop as you want because at the end of the day, it gets published on our platform.
Yeah. Some of it will get one like and some of it will get 100,000 retweets.
And someone will, it's just
shares.
More content for people to put stuff up, which helps us as people post less and less on Facebook or like the demographics that used to post on Facebook. I will say like, I have noticed because I do occasionally open Facebook. I don't think anything's been going on there for like 4 or 5 years at least. That's untrue. As we have talked about in the past, I do open it and get like the neighborhood groups.
Yeah, I think groups are still popping.
Groups still popping, and it serves me a lot of like the last 4 places that I lived, like the suburb groups. I can check out what's going on there just for people to be like, 100 posts of, if this is your car posted on this side street, I saw the person who ran into it. DM me and I'll give you their license plate number. And then like 10 comments are like, just tell the police.
And like someone posting an ad for a business, Thursday is the day for businesses to be posting. Thursday. Today is Wednesday. Tomorrow you can post about your business.
Yeah. I mean, there's that. But also I have noticed every time I open Facebook, there is more and more just like weird AI slop that's been put onto the feed. And like, okay, there's one account or one like bundle of accounts that I keep getting served now. I don't know if anyone else has seen this. It's like a weird movies account where they'll post like a poster from a movie that exists and is real, and they'll have like a whole bunch of text above, which looks kind of AI generated that describes like what the movie is. Like I said, it's like, this is, I don't know, Avengers Infinity War, and then like a description of it. But then they'll just kind of slap in between posts about real movies, the same format, but just like AI generated movies. Like a weird AI generated poster. It's normally like a sequel to a movie that actually exists. A fake synopsis. So it kind of makes it look like a movie that's coming out. And then like you look in the comments, 80,000 likes.
Yeah.
And people tagging their mates like, sick!
Got to check this one out.
But again, you don't know if any of those accounts are fucking real or if they're weird AI generated bots as well. But it seems like the latest engagement hack is to just lie and say that a movie is real.
Fake sequels.
Yeah, fake sequels.
Well, I respect it. Fake news, fake sequels. That's it. Let's not go too far back to kind of Baudrillard or whatever, but like,
I mean,
first we used to talk about fake news, now we talk about like fake fiction.
It is actually kind of interesting that I've not heard any arm of Meta or Zuckerberg himself or whatever even attempt to address that. Like this idea that it's like, what is Facebook, the blue app, or even Instagram, going to look like in 3 or 4 years? Presumably they have some idea in their mind of what.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure he's thinking about the idea of, and we've talked about this before, where like, surely the like ultimate state, we talked about in the sense of Spotify, we talked about with TikTok, is just like the algorithm's just serving you personally generated, like individually, personally generated and targeted pieces of content that just kind of keep you transfixed.
Yeah, and maybe it's AI, maybe it's not, who cares?
Yeah.
But it's not a very like aspirational vision of content.
Because, I mean, you're really getting into the full kind of Matrix territory where you're just like...
But it is kind of interesting that Zuck and all these people talk about this stuff like in the abstract, but he never drills down. Like you'll hear Zuckerberg do these big long essays about open source being in the future. I feel like it's been years since he's actually talked like
How
at
will
any
people
level
engage with content?
about like what it's like to use any of his platforms. He's a chiller guy now. He's obviously a little bit more off the chain in terms of he's not being so insanely managed by. I mean, I could be wrong, but like
it seems like he's doing a little bit more recreation, which might be making him slightly more normal.
Yeah,
dare I say?
But again, it could be he's got a new flack who's like.
Here's the vibe.
People want authenticity. You can't do. But it was definitely a point where he was being overtrained in what he said to the point that it made him seem like a weird robot.
Oh, absolutely.
Just backfired to an insane degree.
Oh, absolutely. Like when he was going on a listening tour of America and deciding to wear suit, he literally was like, "I'm going to wear suits this year because I want to take this very seriously." Like that is not a normal thing.
That's not normal, man. No.
And then like. When you do see him reacting normally, like interacting in a quote unquote normal situation, he's talking about his smoked meats, which everyone was like, that is not a normal way to talk either.
About
like,
your smoke, yeah.
Now it's like, okay, he's training for UFC, which I think raised a few eyebrows, but it's like, oh, I mean, in some ways, there's like a natural urge to
do violence.
For many people to do kind of competitive sport of sorts.
Yeah.
And the fact that like he seems pretty good. It's like, okay, that's kind of, and now we're seeing him doing the jet ski, and it's like, okay, you seem to be being a little bit more normal.
Yeah.
As you say, like, the bloke's very rich. He could have the best, kind of handlers in the world.
Yeah.
But it does seem like he's doing things that maybe he enjoys outside of just amassing power.
It's quite possible. Although, the other side of it, and we've mentioned this before, but, even at the peak of weird quasi-religious AI stuff, like let's say EAC and EAC adjacent things, where it was like this idea of, we talked about this whole thing where like OpenAI benefits hugely from this like apocalyptic AI narrative, right? Where it's kind of like this stuff could turn us all into paperclips and kill us is, crazy sci-fi stuff. And, there's an aspect of it that is worth thinking about where it's kind of like, will this have unexpected outcomes?
Well, their hypothesis was unless someone very smart, intelligent, and well-meaning and ethical people are in control of this stuff, it will kill us all. It was basically the original MO. And them saying, so therefore we need to keep this closed and like we are the smart people. We are going to be like the weird like monks in veils or whatever that will oversee the safe AI that will, come to support humanity. If there's not people like us managing us, then it will kill us all.
Yeah. Or even just like the even more cynical version, which is like the more people talk about AI being so crazy powerful that it could go off the rails and kill everyone.
Yeah, the more business is like, I need some of that.
Exactly. It's the more people are kind of like, okay. It's like that classic thing about when the Japanese, when they were during World War II and before, got their hands on like the insane anti-Semitic propaganda, like the Protocols of the Elders of Zion or whatever, and they were like, we need to get some of these guys into Japan. Because they're killing it. Sort of that vibe. But so point being, that OpenAI benefited from the apocalyptic AI narratives. The absolute opposite is playing out with Meta.
Yeah.
Because their thing is like, let everyone use it.
Yeah.
There's been time and time again, Zuckerberg has like come out as a counter of being like, well, I actually don't think this stuff's going to go crazy. I don't think it's that powerful.
But I mean, there is a counter argument, and I'm certainly not smart enough to fully litigate like what is going to save humanity from AI. I say this all not thinking that AI will kill us, let's be frank. And I've said this from day one. I'm pretty sure even when at the height of AI hysteria, I think I said I don't back us to be good enough to make anything that good.
Yeah, sure.
One argument is, yes, we need the smartest, safest, most ethical people in the world to control this stuff. The other argument is open source means it's transparent. We can all see it. And like the argument against open source is like bad actors can also access it. And, it's just going to be a tit for tat, like arms race. But like if we make it all in the open, the bad actors get it, but then we have to defeat them, blah, 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 blah. But at least it's open and transparent and we all know what's going on. And the flip side is like, the ethical people controlling it is like, that doesn't actually sound that good. Like, who bestowed you, Sam Altman, and your mates with like being the ones to determine like what is good and what is bad AI?
Yeah. Well, although to be fair, I think OpenAI have kind of given up on the safe development of AI messaging because like I don't think.
Well, yes and no, but they're still going to Congress and trying to regulate it, right?
Yeah,
which is like
it's true. But like they're also like safe superintelligence kind of stuff. They're really leaning into. I think it's just because most people are like.
Oh no, I think it's purely cynical now. Like, I don't actually think that they do truly see themselves as like, what's the game where you're like the very famous and high-selling game where you're like a ninja who does flips and climbs up walls and whatnot? Assassin's Creed.
Okay.
Like, there's like a secret society that has to protect humanity or whatever. I don't think they see themselves as that. I don't really know this stuff, but I'm using that as...
Okay,
I assume I'm on the right direction.
I think you're directionally correct.
Thank you. That they see themselves as that. They no longer see themselves as that. I think that, yes, they position themselves that. Now they're like, we want to be a huge, massive company, and so we want regulatory capture.
I don't think it buys anymore. But the point I was building up to is there was something kind of funny in one of those recent Zuckerberg interviews, which played. I was like, you're doing exactly the same thing right here. Is when it was sort of a shot across the bow against EAC and the effective accelerationist people. I don't know if you saw the video. I was going around on Twitter. But it was from one of those interviews, and someone asked him about like this fixation that a lot of them, including Elon, have, which is kind of like uploading your consciousness, human consciousness to a computer. And Zuckerberg did this big, which a lot of people were like, wow, this guy gets it. Because he was but the whole time I was, again, being quite cynical. Because Zuckerberg was like, I don't think you can do that. I don't think, he's not wrong. He was like, the human mind isn't just a mind. Like, we're embodied people. Part of being human is that, like, we desire things, we have limitations, and like humanity is kind of like what emerges in the spaces between our bodily limitations, which is like, I was like, man, you're cooking, you're so right. But also, like, you can just see the cynical thing where he's kind of like, all this stuff is bullshit.
Yeah.
All these like weird semi-religious AI people are like thinking about the fucking singularity and shit.
Yeah.
I'm just serving ads over here, buddy.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, at the end of the day, it's like I'm trying to wedge my competition and get marginal benefit.
They're going psycho over there. Whereas, like, I am running a bunch of very successful, very large platforms. My products touch more people in their daily lives than you guys could ever fucking dream of. I want to be able to work with businesses and build a platform, and I don't need to be thinking about making human consciousness multiplanetary or whatever the fuck you're on about.
Yeah. Which comes kind of back to the point, though, which I think is interesting, which is this whole strategy, like this whole open source strategy where we're going to sink billions of dollars into this stuff in order to quote unquote give it away for free. We've obviously just gone through a bunch of the benefits that do occur, but a lot of those benefits are kind of slightly abstract. They're definitely long term. They're definitely like, so that in 10 years time we're not fucked, which is not kind of shit that realistically like the stock market rewards. And that is one thing I will say about Meta and Facebook. I think you can only really take this strategy if you are... Meta is founder-led. Zuckerberg has more voting rights than anyone. Yep. At the end of the day, he has final say over what they do, which is why they can rename to Meta and do this, in my opinion, insane shit around the metaverse, which still think was a crazy boondoggle.
Yet to pay dividends, yeah.
But in this case, I'm like, I see this. Like, I see the strategy of the open sourcing. I mean, he says... And part of this, again, is strategic. He said in his like article, like, AI is going to go through a bust period. I've been through booms and busts. I can see that happening. And as I alluded to earlier, he's like, so we're thinking about Llama 4, 5, 6, 7. And in that time, there's going to be a bust and people are going to give up hope. But we're still going to be investing, blah, blah. Which is also like him subtly saying to his quote-unquote competition, we got the cash.
Oh, yeah.
To just keep burning through this because we are making so much money. Do you guys have the cash to do this?
No.
And like, you guys also need to find a business model around this. We don't.
No. And this comes back to, there was reporting this week in The Information where they basically calculated, based on the figures, the spreadsheet that The Information had at hand, that OpenAI is going to burn over $5 billion this year. just in pure losses.
And by the way, one of their main competitors is giving away the same product for free.
Yeah, exactly. And like you can quibble over, and GPT-4o I think is still, from what I've seen, better.
Yeah, and the interface is obviously better and stuff. But like at the
yeah. Whereas
in 3 years,
Whereas you're right, Meta is better resourced than almost anyone aside from Apple and Microsoft.
But at the end of the day, Microsoft, with as much money as they have, still want to turn this into a business model, which I think they will be able to do with Office 365 and blah, blah, blah. But like the pay a $30 subscription or for access to an AI that's not fully integrated across like a whole suite of products, or Llama for free.
Yeah, it is. It's, I think the math of it, and we talked about this a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about like the investors getting tetchy about AI. I mean, there's a lot of different touch points there, but you're right. The whole thing of like, the entire AI industry settled on, okay, it's $20 a month for the pro tier of our AI, our chatbot, essentially. And like you get a lesser free version of it or a really tough capped one. And then you pay, at the end of the day, like I pay that, you pay that.
Yeah.
A lot of people pay that. But there's a ceiling on that. The average person.
And the features are getting better, don't get me wrong, where you can like compile your apps. But again, how many fucking people
are going to do it?
And like compiling apps in there,
OpenAI are way behind on launching their proper voice thing, which apparently is going to start rolling out to some users on a beta level next month. But again, is it going to convince people to pay $20?
And that also, once again, reinforces what we said at the time, how OpenAI happened to be... They just happen to make all these announcements just before Google every single time.
Yeah.
Very vaporware-y, where it's like, okay, that you announced that so long ago.
Yeah, I think like when it comes to your average person or the kind of people that you need to build a subscription product at the sort of insane scale that pays for something like ChatGPT or OpenAI in general, it's like how many things have we discovered in life that actually get your average person to pay $20 a month?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like Netflix,
yeah.
And then, I don't know, there's not a whole lot else because people kind of like using the internet for free.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
I mean, this is what all media has kind of found out.
It's figured out. Yeah, we're never getting that newspaper subscription money back. And that was because it was like a nice tactile thing that got delivered to your front door.
Yeah. As opposed to a thing that like you just get the receipt for and you're like, fuck, I haven't used this in 25 days. I'm still paying for this thing.
Yeah. And even
at least a newspaper, it's like, you flick through, it's there.
Your savvy consumers will be more likely to like sign up for ChatGPT with 20 different Gmail addresses.
Yeah.
So they can hit the free cap over and over again than pay $20 a month. But point back, like, you're right. I think they're going to find models. They're going to find ways to make money. I don't know how lasting it's going to be or how it's going to work, but they'll find ways of doing it that probably are not going to rely on average consumers paying $20 a month for it at a scale that justifies it. But you're right. Meta does not need to answer that question because they have a phenomenal ad engine. They have a phenomenal amount of money coming in. Their big question is like, how can we expand inventory? All right, sure, we're going to build up Threads. Reels is pumping. Even the blue Facebook app, which seems like a graveyard, still makes a bunch of money for them.
Yeah.
Spectacular amount of money. WhatsApp. They've got this incredible revenue engine so they can just burn this stuff and weather it.
Yeah, and even, as I say, justify, like, even in the kind of short term, being like, well, if we get a marginal improvement on our ad recommendation algorithm through, like, open sourcing it and seeing the innovation there, that's something.
Yeah.
That's something. We're not gunning for $20 a month. Like, there's still benefit to open sourcing it, as well as we already outlined, the, like, lack of being locked into someone else's system and blah, 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 blah. Like, there's still benefit, let alone all of that, like, much bigger potential of AI.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah.
I think when we started this podcast, I, like everyone, not a big Facebook fan, but I don't know. Maybe it's the eyes, maybe it's the hair, maybe it's the chain. But, damn.
That boy is swaggy as hell.
If you're listening to this, Have I got an offer for you? Imagine this, but twice a week and without any interruptions.
No interruptions, no ads, 2 episodes a week.
Yeah.
Sounds pretty good to me.
There is a world in which this is possible.
Yep.
If you go to downround.net, $7 a month. $7 a month. That's not a week. That's $7 a month. Extra episode, no ads, hang out with the lads.
Yep.
That's me and you. You can hang out with our audience perhaps soon, who knows, of which the gender breakdown is different to the gender breakdown at the table here. Sex, okay. That went off the rails.
I would say we keep it short and punchy the way that it currently is.
Let's no longer talk about gender.
We can't talk about gender. All right, cool.